Welcome. My name is Tracy Rend, and I'm Superintendent of Lamoille South Supervisory Union. I'm joined this evening by my colleague, John Pike, the Director of Finance and Operations for Lamoille South. Our goal is to tell you about the year-round budget development process we use in LSSU and how we use that process to ensure alignment between our vision for public education in the communities we serve, data and evidence, and the development and management of a budget that supports our vision. In each of the districts of the Lamoille South Supervisory Union, budget is considered a policy document that establishes a framework for the management of the school system. Budget is one of the most important responsibilities of the board, as it is essential that the budget advances the mission and vision, and it's also important as a frame for engaging and interacting with the community. Understanding that budget is much like a policy or vision statement, there are three key ideas to keep in mind as you think about budget. First, as I mentioned, budget is an important frame for community engagement, but the implications of that are deeper than community interest in tax rates and quality of education in local schools. Budget management is the bedrock for the foundation of trust between education stakeholder groups. In order to have the time and trust to focus on education, on students, on teaching and learning, the financial house must be in order. Second, clear roles and responsibilities are essential. Whether you're talking about development, administration, or accountability for any part of the budget cycle, in order to be efficient and effective, roles and responsibilities need to be clear. And thirdly, budget development is year-round work. For the rest of the presentation, we explain the year-round budget cycle to give you an idea on a practical level of how we in LSSU think about, develop, manage, and administer budgets to sustain that trust through having the financial house in order and to advance a vision for quality education in our schools. We'll begin by giving you an overview of the year-round budget development cycle stages and how they play out over the course of a calendar year. Then we'll go into a little more detail about each of the stages. We think of the year-round budget cycle as having 8 stages. Budget engagement is the work of the board and work done with the community to explore priorities and needs. It's also a time for the board to learn about research and best practices and other important understandings such as education funding in Vermont. Budget development is the translation of a district's vision and priorities to a specific budget for a particular fiscal year. Budget approval begins once a board has adopted a budget and involves working with the community to ensure an informed vote on town meeting day. Budget implementation is the work between town meeting and July 1st, the beginning of a fiscal year, to make necessary changes and set the foundation for operating within a budget. The last 4 stages are just what they sound like. Budget management is purchasing, encumbering, paying invoices, reprioritizing, and freezing. Budget closeout is the closing of the books at the end of the fiscal year. Budget audit is the annual financial audit, and budget reporting is the review of the audit results by the board and reporting to the community and other key stakeholder groups. There is an important role for board members in overseeing the effective implementation of all stages, but the stages highlighted in yellow are the stages where boards have the leading role. These stages play out in a multi-year process that actually spans 3 years.
As Tracy indicated on the previous slide, we view the budgeting cycle as a multi-year process which spans over a period of approximately 3 years. This process commences with the budget engagement process shortly after town meeting day each year and culminates with the audit process and inclusion of the audit report in our annual report to ensure accountability to the community. This next slide shows how the budget cycle overlaps on a continual basis. As highlighted in yellow, you can see that in May of 2013, we will actually be dealing with 3 different budget cycles, being the management of the FY13 budget, implementation of the FY14 budget, and engagement in the FY15 budget cycle.
Now for a little more detail on each of the stages. Budget engagement, as we have framed it in the calendars on previous slides, spans from April to September. Actually, it is year-round work, but from April to September, it is the primary work of the board with the community. The goal of budget engagement is to make sure the board has the information needed to make good decisions in a compressed time frame. That time frame when we have complete information about all three parts of a budget: the proposed expenditures, the anticipated revenues, and the tax rate implications. It is also an important opportunity for community dialogue and input. Board engagement in the districts of LSSU spans a range of items, from concrete to abstract and broad to specific. Engagement is not just about the future. It involves reflecting on the impact of the decisions of the past and may play out in board agendas as a review of things like energy utilization or a reflection on the impact of a new or revised program. Some examples of budget engagement topics on the agendas of school boards in LSSU are listed on this slide and range from a review of research on middle-level best practice to the exploration of technology enhancement opportunities in our region. We don't always put specific dollar amounts to these items. Rather, we identify where they might fit as a priority for resources and support in the future, with an eye to the overall vision for the school system.
Our budget development process kicks off with our first administrators meeting in early September. We present to administrators a budget timeline and expectations for submission of building-based budgets based on building administrators' work with staff at their respective buildings. Discussions with the board and community during the budget engagement process are factored into building a draft budget that takes into consideration staffing needs and other program costs to deliver educational programs that satisfy community needs. At the budget kickoff meeting, roles and responsibilities are clearly defined, and model forms are provided to ensure consistency in submitting information that will be compiled in a draft budget. Once a draft budget is completely developed, consideration is given to expectations communicated by the board and community during the budget engagement process. A revised draft budget is compiled and tax rate implications are developed based on preliminary assumptions relating to the several variables used in the tax rate calculation, including anticipated revenues, particularly relating to special education grants and reimbursements, as well as other state grants, equalized pupils, base education amount, the base homestead and non-homestead tax rates, and the CLA. Ongoing revisions to our estimated tax rates are made as new information is received from the state throughout November and December. Presentation of a recommended budget is formally made to the board and community in early January. Over the course of the month, the board takes the opportunity to reflect on the recommended budget and request additional information from the administration, and to consider any potential changes to the recommended budget. The boards will adopt a budget by the end of January to be included in the annual report for consideration of the voters on town meeting day in March. After town meeting day, when a budget is passed, the budget implementation process begins. This process would include following the proper procedures as defined in our collective bargaining agreements in the case of a reduction in force, as well as the preparation of contracts for staff that we plan to retain. Additionally, we start the process of bidding out for the myriad of services and supplies as required by our budget plan. The final step of the budget implementation process is to input our approved budgets into our financial accounting system. The budget management process takes place during the fiscal year that the budget is in effect. In order to effectively manage the budget in a fiscally responsible manner, we have internal controls in place which ensure that we live within the financial constraints of the budget approved by the voters. In order to manage costs effectively, a purchase order system is in place to encumber obligations of the school district. Prior to purchase orders being approved, the expenditure lines that are being encumbered are checked against current year-to-date payments and previously approved outstanding encumbrances. Purchase orders are not authorized unless there are funds available to spend, or unless the building administrator freezes expenditures from other unencumbered expenditure lines within their control. Invoices are ultimately approved by building administrators and submitted to the central office for payment processing. On a monthly basis, expenditure reports are reviewed to ensure that expenditures are in line with our budget plan. Our boards are kept informed of any circumstances that we anticipate will require us to deviate materially from the budget approved by the voters. Examples of circumstances that arise from time to time would be unanticipated special education needs, unanticipated enrollment increases that would require the hiring of additional teaching staff, turnover of staff at higher rates of compensation, unanticipated changes in health benefit coverages by employees, etc. In all cases of unanticipated expenditures, our first step is to attempt to freeze unanticipated expenditures from other unencumbered expenditure lines in our budget. We communicate any significant unanticipated expenditures with our boards along with our plan to address the unanticipated need. At the end of the fiscal year, we enter into the closeout, audit, and reporting process of the budgeting cycle. The closeout includes a review of any outstanding purchase orders with building administrators to determine whether they should be kept open at year end. Contracts for services are also reviewed to ensure that all payments have been recorded properly in the appropriate fiscal year. Accruals are made as necessary to account for wages and other expenditures which should be properly reflected in the current fiscal year. Once we've completed the monthly reconciliation process and made all proper adjustments to accurately reflect both the revenues and expenditures for the year, our financial books are closed for the fiscal year and presented to independent auditors who conduct a thorough review of our internal controls, ensure that we are following our established accounting procedures, and that our financial statements properly, consistently, and fairly reflect the financial position of the school district for that year. In addition, year-end figures are reported to the state in several forms, including the annual statistical report, otherwise known as the stat book, grant reports, and special education reports. The final audit report is issued by the auditors and included in the next year's annual report. This closes the loop on the 3-year budget cycle and provides the public with a final measure of accountability for the management of public funds.
Throughout the year-round budget cycle, the roles and responsibilities of key stakeholders within each district are very similar to that for policy. Input on the development of policy is informed from the instructional level, from faculty and staff, with attention to the implications from the place where the rubber meets the roads, between teachers and students where learning happens. In Lamoille South, district and supervisory union administrative teams work closely to translate those needs and priorities into numbers and to manage each school and each K-12 system to deliver on the vision and meet the learning needs within the budget parameters. The board's responsibility is the development and oversight of the vision and holding the administrative team accountable for the management of the budget. And to bring the conversation full circle, I'd like to return to the idea that a well-administered budget, where roles and responsibilities are clear, where there are clearly articulated processes and a multi-year view, and when there's an emphasis on budget as a vision or policy type document, enables a focus of time and resources on what's most important to all of us, students and learning. We encourage you to speak with your administrative team for information about budget development and management in your organization. And we welcome questions or comments at our email addresses, which are posted on this slide. Thank you and good night.